Hi guys, I haven't done a video for a while. There's not really been that much to say as far as I'm concerned at the moment. I think in terms of the current Bitcoin situation, if you're only here to kind of back up your own beliefs that this is only going to go one way and kind of keep on going forever, then I think it's best you just kind of stop this video now. I think overall, all I'm trying to put out there is a little bit of logic as to where we are within the cycle. Okay, now I have loads of people come to me and say plan B this and plan B that. Yeah, okay guys, everybody's a genius in a bull market. I'm going to go back and show some of the calls from March where I was explaining the logic as to why we are where we are. Now, the problem I have in terms of a stock to flow analysis on something like this is that it's actually all based around demand. So as soon as demand starts breaking down, and you've also got to look at things like the altcoins at the moment. If the altcoins are there kind of capturing the inflow of cash, the demand on Bitcoin is not always going to be met. So you don't have this kind of straight line trajectory as we were seeing from 2017 through to the first all-time high. Okay. Now, if we look at what we've done since the all-time high, the first all-time high, we've actually come up, we've cleared to a new all-time high, and then actually been rejected. Right now, for me, that doesn't give me confidence in an out-and-out bull market that we're looking to create, massive new all-time highs before some kind of corrective move. Okay, so when you look back at where we are in terms of the supply versus the demand, and actually the demand right now is sitting in the altcoin kind of domain more than the Bitcoin domain, then we'll actually see that we're only, I suppose, we're only at what I would regard as a monthly three when we look at the Elliott wave cycle. Okay. Now, in the grand scheme of things, when you're looking at how and why and where the stock to flow model, I suppose, will start to not so much fall apart, but you'll start to question this, right? Is that the supply being one way and the demand being guessed will actually face kind of speed bumps or hurdles along the way, which will include things like the governments, obviously the bigger banks. You're going to see things like banking fees when regulated banks start saying, well, we accept crypto, but here's the caveat. We then have the regulators, you've got things like taxation. KYC is going to play a big factor in AML in the overall kind of grand scheme of this. And therefore, they all become obstacles in terms of how you determine demand. Okay. Now, what I'll do is I'll start off by showing, before going into this, I'll come back to what I've preached, I guess, kind of since March, really. And I just want to highlight this particular call from March. This wasn't just, hey, here the price is going to be. It was actually some logic as to why the price was doing what I thought the price would be doing. So I was expecting a drop down. This was obviously a 5-wave move down. Overall, this is nothing to do with Elliott. This particular one, this was actually Wyckoff related in terms of the, I suppose, the labeling convention. So I was actually seeing what I would regard as the buyer's climax and then taking this down. So I've actually written some articles on that within TradingView. If you haven't already seen those, I'll actually put a link to one of them into the bottom of the YouTube video. But the longs and shorts of this was I was looking for the price to come on down. Right now, this is something that without trying to determine demand in the market, you can actually use the cycles and the waves that give us the moves, right? So there's the first kind of subsection. Obviously, TradingView we can't edit or can't amend in any which way. So we've actually got the first drop down to A, back up to B, all the way down. I think for me personally, C was actually over here on this swing around the 24th to 26th of April, back up for what I would regard as the D, and then down for the E. Okay, so the logic was kind of there, and from the move then up to here, the move was up, and nothing really kind of unexpected, nothing untoward. This was the first part of the move. Now, the second thing was I'd actually put this into a full out, full on Elliott roadmap just a couple of days after this. So around the 26th, if you come into my profile, you'll see on the 26th, I'd actually put the Bitcoin roadmap. And this roadmap is quite detailed in terms of where we were. So I assumed that we were at the weekly 3, coming down for the weekly 4 before giving us the weekly 5. Okay, upright. Now the weekly 5, in theory, should actually become the monthly 3. Okay, so the suggestion was this. You can see this image going back, like I said, the 26th of March. And actually, the anticipation was down to 4, up to 5. The only problem that I have with this right now is that I felt that at the time, almost a V-shaped recovery for this would have been the optimal kind of forecast and into the 85 to 95k. Okay, so that was the region that I was looking for. And if I come across to the actual charts, I'm going to stick this onto the weekly so it marries what we were actually looking at there. I'm going to come into the old drawings and I'm going to find the weekly forecast. So this was the weekly forecast. This mirrors what I've just shown you on the 26th of March. So you've got the Wyckoff call. You've actually got this call all the way up to where we are right now. And I'll show you this in a second. So this particular move. Okay. So this particular move from the 3 down to the 4 and up we go, right? Now, the one thing that's changed for me and the one thing that I'm a little bit more concerned about is, like I said right at the start of the video, the move to a new all-time high should actually be pretty impulsive, breaking through the previous high. The fact that we've come up and actually rejected from that level and still struggling to go even beyond the old all-time high would suggest to me that we've been searching for liquidity up at this level and now getting that rejection from there. Now, this on a larger time frame would actually look, I suppose, pretty much that the 3 could easily be in. We might get another little rally up towards it, but I think I'm going to have to start looking now at the Elliott move inside from the 4 to what I would regard as potentially the 5. And I say potentially because this isn't going to be 100% accurate. This isn't going to be the be all and end all. I think all I'm trying to do is to highlight why this isn't, a kind of a moonshot just yet. I know I've mentioned this in a couple of streams. I know a lot of the perma bulls definitely don't like this as a message, but I think you've just got to be realistic in terms of where we are and why we are here within this journey. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll turn this now off and I'll look at this on the monthly time frame. And on the monthly time frame, I'm going to come back to the Weiss wave moves that we've looked at. And like I said before, I think we've got a 1. I think we've got 2. I think we got the 3, which means potentially 4 is actually still playing itself out because we could easily be seeing just an expanded flat in terms of an a B, and then down for a C, which doesn't necessarily have to be deep, but it could just come down to the same levels and then we go for real. Now, personally, I'd be happier with this move if I was to take this on my personal account. This would be something that I'd be quite keen on if that was the play that I see next. Okay. Now, bear in mind, we are on a monthly time frame. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll step down then into the weekly time frame. And what I'm actually seeing from the weekly time frame is, although we've moved up, which means we could regard this as a weekly 4, and like I said, this could easily be the weekly 5. I'll come into this in a second. If that is the case, we've actually got pretty rubbish volume in comparison to what you've seen in the 3 here, and obviously the one prior to that. Okay, so even this look as a 1 was a much, much higher profile than what we currently see in here. So the next, I suppose, potential option for where we could be and potentially likely be is that if we assume that this is still in a weekly 4 move, right? Now, this is going to be harder for many people to grasp given that we've taken a new all-time high. But like I said, with the expanded flat option, the volume that we see or didn't see on this move up actually gives some logic and some reason as to why this could just be an expanded flat B and we come down then for a C, which would in essence complete a weekly 4 overall, taking us then to a new high, which I'd be more comfortable putting up then again back to, the 95, 85 kind of region, so up around here as a move on up. Okay. Now, I've talked about this. If you are involved in our Discord, I know a lot of this is more for the subscribers rather than the visitors, but I've actually talked about some of this. What I'll do is I will share the August post with you. So I'll just take this one off, and I will share with you the August post. So where I was expecting in August, the move, uh, as I've mentioned, you'll see on the top. This was the 24th of August, 2021. Um, this was an option that, again, personally, I didn't like. I didn't like the volume on the move up. We're anticipating a move back down from the three. That move come, and then ultimately up for a five. The five extension there was just above the 65 level. You'll see the target up at the top right hand side of the screen. So, in essence, we've done nothing really, unexpected or untoward, and therefore, I'm going to spend a little bit more time breaking down where potentially we are within the, I suppose, the four to the potential five, or whether or not this is just then an expanding flat as a move on up. Okay. So what I'll do now is I will put the this one on, and I will come in to the software. And in this particular move, I'm going to just go back to what I've said now in terms of the weekly, monthly position. And this is really kind of backing up what I've just said. So we've come, ignore where the twos come from. So we've come two, we've potentially come down from three to four, and we're now moving on four to five. Okay. Now, there's no real kind of hard and fast rule in terms of the fifth wave extension. It could actually be the equivalent to 100% of the 0 to 1. We could actually see a larger move taking us to the 2-618, and I do believe this was actually to the 3-618 with a hyperextended 2 to 3 move overall. So, clearly we've taken some kind of high out of this one, which would have put me there for just that level. Now, the fact that we've practically rejected straight away from that level, like I said, does give me reason for some concern. Now, if I step down into this level and bring it from the 4 to the 5, I'm actually looking for logic from the 0 to the 1, from the 1 back to the 2. What the advanced get is actually talking about as a 3. This would have been the 4, and we now seeing a 5. Okay, so for me, even that sits there. It's obvious. It's kind of fluid. It's kind of doing what I was expecting this to do all the way back in March, right? Now, the only thing that I've changed in my overall bias and my overall opinion is actually the fact that I feel that we're likely to go down from here rather than back up. And I think if we do go back up, we'll probably see another test of the high. This is something that I've mentioned back probably again in August. We might actually see as high as 75. And this is just again based off some Fibonacci extension levels. I think if we come to this particular point, there's only so far that the expanded flat will go, and I haven't looked kind of too deeply into. I'll come into this in a second. But in essence, what I'm seeing right now is option one is potentially an expanded flat, giving us an A, B, and down for a C on the weekly move, which is almost the best outcome because if we come down weekly 4, then we're going to have a much greater weekly 5 than beyond the 75 region. And then at that particular point, it's only then we create the actual monthly 3. Now, the second option is that the current 5 that we have within the software is indeed the monthly 3. And if the monthly 3 is sitting there, then we're going to be looking for an ABC type corrective move anyway, even with the best will in the world. So it's just a question of whether or not this is kind of done, complete, and finished. So what I'll do is I will stick the extensions on, and I'll just go from the low up to the 1 and back down for the 2. And if we look at where we are with a 2, we've clearly hit the 4-6-1-8 and just rejected from that level. So we come up to a 2-6-1-8. So again, even this was extended beyond the recommended Elliott forecasts. We come straight back down into the same kind of region. I'll do some retracements on that again in a second. And then from this, obviously up to the 5, which means it does actually fit quite a nice cycle. Though I didn't like the 0 to 1 move, I didn't like the low volume up. And this is what makes me feel a little bit more like potentially still corrective moves at force rather than an impulsive move up. And I'm just going to reiterate this, guys. If this is impulsive and this is what impulsive looks like, I think we're in bigger trouble than I guess anybody realizes right now, because this would give us an impulsive move, if this is what you're calling it, and a much, much bigger drop still to come. And the fact that this then gives us a 3 to 4 monthly period, we can actually see that from the 3 high weekly down to the 4 actually went all the way from around April time and completed April, May, June, July. So yeah, around the start of July, in terms of this particular move. So we're talking months and months and months just on a weekly. Can you imagine what a monthly is going to look like as a whole? Okay. So I don't want to be the bearer of bad news, but I think you just need to take this into consideration when you're looking for a hodl type trade. And this is one of the things for me that put me off this particular move. I wasn't going to take the August move as a whole. I didn't feel there was enough upside reward for my type of style trading, and therefore just kind of sat on my hands, kind of kept myself out and looking at this again. So it's one of the reasons I've been a little bit quiet in terms of the videos. It's not doing anything that I haven't already said and kind of said 3, 4, 5 times already, and going back months and months and months in terms of the analysis. So right now, if I come back into the other software and I come into the trading view software, so I'm going to just get rid of this one and I'm going to put this one back on. And then what I'd like to do is just to make a couple of other key points. Now, if we look at where we are from a stochastic perspective, and let's assume that we are still corrective as a whole, then we're already on a weekly time frame. Although we do have a false bar, we're already in the overbought situation. So again, nothing really screaming, bullish pressure to the moon. This is what I'm not looking for. This is what I'm not seeing right now. So I'm just going to emphasize one more time. If this is bullish, then I'm a little bit concerned as to where this isn't going. And if this is now bearish, then I think ultimately I'd like to see a dip back down to around these liquidity levels here. At this particular point, I think that would give me completion for a 4 on the weekly, presuming this being an expanded flat 4 move back up then for the 5. And my 5 target would actually be around the 83. I'd probably take it up to 103 as a full out, given a little bit of hype in the market. So that would be one of the moves that I'm looking for. Now, the second option, like I said, is on the monthly time frame. I think if we look at the monthly and we were to assume that this was the 3, this was the 4, and this was the 5 on a weekly time frame, then the matter of fact is this was a monthly 3, and what we'd likely to expect now is a comparable pattern to this sitting here on a monthly time frame, which, if we're looking at April to July as this particular move down, then I think we could probably be easily into Q2 next year before we see anything. So I am hoping that we got the expanded flat version and we go 4 quite sharply down, up for 5, taking us to 100K by Christmas. And in terms of what you're seeing from the stock to flow model, yeah, that could probably be quite likely if we were to assume we take a decent drop from this move first. So I'd like to see, back to 35, 40K ideally. We might only get 42, and then 42 up to 85 to 103 realistically, I think is probably where I'd forecast this as a whole. So like I said, I think this is yeah, pretty much what I'm seeing. There's nothing really changed, like I said, in terms of the bias, the forecast. I think the only thing that I am a little bit more, yeah, kind of weary of is that if we are actually now at a 5, then I think the fact that we've had this low volume up means that yeah, we probably monthly 3, and we kind of sat there toying with it a little bit at the moment until we get a clear break of this in terms of the stochastic. So yeah, I think that's where I'm sat at the moment. Like I said, nothing's really changed, and I know this one is very repetitive. I know this one is only covering what I've already covered, in the last 3, 4, 5 streams. even going back 3, 4 months in terms of this. Um, it's just kind of where I think we are. So I think that at the moment is enough in terms of where the forecasts are. Now, what I'd like to do to finish off with is to break down this last little move on the daily time frame and to look at from the current low. One of the reasons that I didn't like this was if we were to assume a zero, we had a 1, 2, 3 move, which isn't ideal but plausible. I actually see a 5 in here. Now, you could argue 3, obviously. Now, if we come down here to there, then in essence, we're seeing a 1, we're seeing a 2. This would be clear as day 3. This was a 4. And this then giving us the 5 up high, which then takes us into that territory of monthly 3 at this high. Okay, so justifying these as particular moves, I'm going to use just quickly the Fibonacci extension levels. Something else I've covered within the Discord, you saw the forecast up at this particular level, and it was 66,000, I think 200, um, actually to the pip more or less. This had a nice rejection, and now it's just a question of where we go from that rejection. So just get rid of this, and I will finish off with the extension. So I'm going to go from the low there up to the 2, 1, and back down to the 2. This gives me the target 3 at the 2,618. So clearly an extension on the 1. We had a nice pullback down for the 2 move, which is obviously the 4 in this. I'm going to go on this one, and I'm going to go from the top down to the low and back up to the swing high. Now, although this is quite shallow, it does actually justify in a a 0,618, which is just a 61%. I don't like to call this one a 1 in terms of a full symmetry type move. But I think for me, the fact that we did hit a 618 actually keeps the pullback bias in check. So the last thing I'm going to do there is stick a retracement on from the 2 up to the 3. That actually give us a 50% retracement. So a lot of confluence sitting in and around that level. I think that would be the zone. So yeah, kind of qualified for me in terms of the move. So although I didn't like the 0 to 1, didn't like the 1 to 2, the 2 to 3 makes it a little bit more of an Elliott bias as a whole. And therefore, what we can see in this move is potentially, now this is where the 75 level that I just mentioned a couple of minutes ago, this is where this for me comes into play, okay? So if we were to assume, let me just clean this up a little bit, if we were to assume this particular move, what we then have to do is to work out if this move is actually complete within the move, okay? So for me, we would have a 0 to a 1, very similar to the smaller one here. This is what they would call a nested 0, 1. We would have a 2, which would take us down to the low. So again, it kind of justifies the fact that we didn't make a new low. We would then like to see a 3. So I'm going to give this the benefit of the doubt and say that let's assume that this is currently the 3 inside that move. Now, don't get too excited because this gives us only a couple of options to play out, okay? So if I was to assume a move like this, I want to stick the trend-based extension in. I'm going to go 0 to 1 and back down for the low 2, and that's broad enough for me. Then in essence, we could potentially argue a 4 in this region. I didn't see that good enough there as a 4 there, so we could argue that as a 4. We've clearly hit the 3,618 there, most of the way to a 4. So I'd probably stick a big question mark on that as a zone, although that's a colossal zone. I'd stick a question mark on those 2 areas there once I get out of that. And therefore, best case scenario, we've got a 3, we've got a 4, and we're likely to see some kind of 5, which is probably more likely to create some kind of double top. We might go from 67 to around 75, which was just the extension levels, I do believe, on this again. So I'm just going to clarify that with myself. Then, well, maybe even 70k, but I think again, for the sake of some hype, given the retail fear in this place, the linear thinkers that are only thinking one way, then the fact that we go to 75 would not really be a major surprise. I think, if anything, we potentially pop back up to test the current new all time high. And then I think if that's the case, that would justify a 5, which would actually then become the monthly 3. And then we go down ABC. Now, that ABC could take us all the way back down to 40K or around that kind of region. And then at that point, providing that happens quick enough, then I think we are on the route to 100K. But I think until we get that kind of corrective move, I think 75 is a realistic cap. We could already be capped at the 67. And if we do go above and beyond, I think before we hit that 100K, I'd probably suggest we're going to see a rejection from the 83 to about 103 level, which was going back to the original forecast back in March on this particular call here. So as you'll see, about 83 up. I know this one I had about 95, which was the actual fib levels, but I wouldn't be surprised to see 103. From Composite Man's perspective, taking it to 100K and crashing it back down to 40 would actually be the most evil thing they could do in terms of Composite Man. Um, but I wouldn't be at all surprised. There's a lot of people that have lost money on this kind of thing. I read recently the squad game moves, and some guy had lost 28 grand of his own life savings. And this is the problem. You got non-investors trying to beat the market. They might get lucky once or twice, just the same as going to Vegas. You stick everything on black or red. You win a couple of times. You just bet bigger every time you go, and at some point it bites you. And I think this is for me the current concern in terms of the crypto market. So I'd like to see personally a move back down 4, taking it to 5, potentially for Christmas, and that then is in tune with the stock to flow. However, I think realistically we're going to be coming down anyway. It's just a question of whether that's from the 3 in terms of monthly, or whether it's still within that larger, well, smaller but larger in terms of it's still going on. So it's a relatively large corrective, expanded flat move. So anyway, I'm sorry for blabbering on. I hope this one makes a little bit of sense as to what we're seeing, why I'm seeing it, and I hope you enjoyed this one, although it isn't extremely bullish as everybody else would like. So, yeah, have a great weekend, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for watching.